In 1897, a writer named Bram Stoker created a story that would become one of the most famous in the world. This story is called Dracula. It takes place in Europe, especially in Transylvania, a dark land full of mystery. A man named Jonathan Harker travels there for work. But that journey soon turns into something else, something filled with fear and secrets. There, he meets a man who is not ordinary, Count Dracula. A figure with hidden powers, living a life unlike any other. Some say he is a vampire, others say he is a legend of terror. But the truth begins when you enter his castle. If you enjoy stories of horror, mystery, and deep meaning, stay with me until the end, because this is only the beginning. Jonathan Harker leaves Munich at night May 1st. He travels by train to Vienna and Budapest. He feels he is leaving the West and going into the East. He sees rivers, bridges, and mountains. He is going to a strange and far place. He eats spicy chicken called paprika. He also eats mamaliga, corn porridge, stuffed eggplant. He wants to remember the recipes for Mina Murray. New place, new food. Harker studied maps in London. He learns many different people live there. The place has many strange beliefs and superstitions. He is going to meet Count Dracula. The place is mysterious and a little scary. He cannot sleep well. A dog is howling outside. He has strange dreams. Something feels wrong. He arrives in Bistritz. He stays at Golden Krone Hotel. People are waiting for him. Someone already knows he is coming. The letter from Dracula. He gets a letter from Count Dracula. The letter says, "Welcome, a carriage will come for you. Continue your journey tomorrow." Dracula is ready to meet him. Jonathan Harker learns the innkeeper got a letter from Count Dracula. The innkeeper and his wife act scared. They refuse to talk about Dracula. People are afraid of Dracula and do not want to speak. The old woman begs Harker not to go. She says, "Tonight is St. George's Eve. Evil things are strong at midnight." She gives him a crucifix cross. She believes danger is coming and wants to protect him. Harker gets on the carriage. People look at him with pity and fear. They say strange words: devil, hell, witch, vampire/werewolf. They make the sign of the cross to protect him. People think he is going to a dangerous place. The land is very beautiful, green hills, forests, flowers everywhere. The road is rough, but the driver goes fast. The place is beautiful, but something feels wrong. They travel into the Carpathian Mountains. Harker sees high peaks, snow, waterfalls. A man says, "God's seat," and makes the sign of the cross. The mountains are powerful and a little frightening. Jonathan Harker travels as the sun goes down. Mountains turn pink, then dark. He sees crosses by the road, people praying. The place is beautiful but feels strange and serious. Passengers are nervous. They tell the driver to go faster. The coach moves fast and shakes. Everyone feels danger is near. They enter Borgo Pass. The sky becomes dark and heavy like a storm. People give Harker gifts and blessings. They think he needs protection. They enter Borgo Pass. The sky becomes dark and heavy, like a storm. People give Harker gifts and blessings. They think he needs protection. A black carriage arrives. The driver is tall and scary. He has bright eyes, strong grip. He takes Harker. The driver is not normal. Something is wrong. They travel in darkness. It becomes cold and snowy. Dogs and wolves start howling. The night becomes scary and dangerous. Harker sees strange blue flames. The driver stops and goes to them. He moves stones in a strange way. Something supernatural is happening. Wolves come from everywhere. They surround the carriage. Harker is very afraid. They are trapped. The driver raises his arms. Wolves move back and disappear. The driver controls the wolves. They arrive at a big dark castle. No lights, very silent. It looks broken and scary. Harker has reached Dracula's castle. Jonathan Harker wakes up at the castle. The place is big, dark, and quiet. The driver leaves him alone. Harker is alone in a strange castle. A tall old man opens the door. He is Count Dracula. He says, "Welcome to my house." Dracula is polite, but very strange. Dracula shakes Harker's hand. His hand is very strong, very cold like dead. He does not feel like a normal human. Dracula gives Harker food. Harker eats chicken, cheese, wine. Dracula does not eat. Harker eats. Dracula only watches. Dracula looks very pale, sharp white teeth, red lips, strange face. His hands have hair and long nails. He looks human, but not normal. Wolves howl outside. Dracula says, "Listen, children of the night." Dracula likes the wolves. Harker feels confused, afraid, unsure. He thinks something is wrong. He feels danger but cannot explain it. No servants in the castle. No mirrors anywhere. Everything is rich, old, quiet. The castle is rich, but empty and strange. Harker finds a library full of English books. Dracula studies England. He wants to go to London. Dracula is learning about England. Dracula says he knows English words, but wants to speak better. He asks Harker to help him. Harker will teach Dracula. Count Dracula says he wants to speak English perfectly. He does not want people to know he is a stranger. He asks Jonathan Harker to help him. Dracula wants to live in England and look normal. Dracula explains, blue flames show where treasure is hidden. They appear only one night. People are too afraid to go there. The place has old magic and superstition. Harker tells him about the house in England. The place, big and old, has high walls, has a dark pond, near a madhouse. Dracula chooses a dark and quiet place. Dracula says he likes old places. He likes darkness. He likes to be alone. He does not like light or happy places. Harker finds a map of England. Some places are marked: London, Exeter, Whitby. Dracula has a plan. Harker feels alone, afraid. He thinks, maybe I am the only living person here. He is starting to understand the danger. Harker is shaving. Dracula stands behind him, but no reflection in the mirror. Dracula is not normal. Harker cuts his chin. Dracula sees blood and attacks. The crucifix stops him. Dracula wants blood but fears the cross. Harker explores the castle. He finds many locked doors, no way out. Castle on a high cliff. He cannot escape. Jonathan Harker discovers something terrible. He is a prisoner. He runs around the castle, trying every door. All doors are locked. Windows show deep cliffs. No escape. At first, he panics like a trapped animal. Later, he calms down and starts thinking carefully. He realizes the Count already knows he is trapped. There is no point telling Dracula his plans. He must stay quiet, watch carefully, and think smart. Harker begins to notice very strange things. There are no servants in the castle. The Count does everything himself: cooking, cleaning, making beds. He may be the same driver who brought Harker. He has supernatural power, like controlling wolves. Harker remembers. People were afraid for him. They gave him a cross, crucifix, garlic. and other protections. Now he understands. These were not random gifts, they were warnings. At night, Harker talks with the Count. Dracula speaks proudly about his people, the Sikelis. They were great warriors, they fought many enemies, Turks, Hungarians, others. He talks as if he lived through these battles himself. This is very strange, because it would mean he is very, very old. He even mentions powerful historical figures like Attila the Hun, as if they are part of his bloodline. Dracula asks many smart questions about business in England. Can he use different lawyers? How to send goods to different ports? How to manage money and shipping? Backhand index pointing right. Harker realizes Dracula is very intelligent and careful. He plans everything in detail. Then Dracula gives Harker a command, warning: write letters home and say you will stay 1 month. Harker understands. The Count will read the letters. He cannot write freely, so he plans, write simple letters for Dracula to see. Write secret messages to Mina using shorthand. Before leaving, Dracula gives a chilling warning. Never sleep anywhere in the castle except your room. He says, the castle is old, it has bad dreams, something terrible may happen if Harker sleeps elsewhere. His final gesture is frightening, like he is washing his hands in blood. Harker is now a prisoner in the castle. Dracula is not normal, strong, strange, possibly supernatural. The castle has no servants. Dracula is always watching. Dracula is planning something big in England. Harker must act carefully and secretly to survive. Jonathan is still trapped inside the dark castle. But now the story shifts to new people and another hidden mystery. While Dracula is planning something terrifying, in London love, heartbreak, and danger begin to grow among people who know nothing about what is coming. 3 men gave their hearts to Lucy in a single day. But the real darkness has not yet begun. Part 2 takes us into a new world of friendship, romance, and the first signs of Dracula's coming tragedy. While Jonathan was trapped inside Dracula's castle, far away in London, another story was beginning, one that would slowly become connected to the darkness of Count Dracula. This part of Dracula is very scary and mysterious. Jonathan Harker puts a crucifix above his bed because he hopes it will protect him from bad dreams and evil. He feels like a prisoner inside Dracula's castle. One night, Jonathan looks out the window and sees something shocking. Count Dracula crawls down the castle wall like a lizard, head first. Jonathan becomes terrified because he realizes Dracula is not a normal human. The next day, Jonathan explores the castle while Dracula is away. Most doors are locked, but he finally finds a beautiful old room where noble women once lived long ago. He decides to sleep there instead of returning to Dracula's dark rooms. Later that night, Jonathan sees 3 beautiful women appear in the moonlight. They are attractive but frightening. Their eyes shine strangely, and they have sharp white teeth. One blonde woman comes close to Jonathan and tries to bite his neck. Jonathan feels both fear and strange attraction at the same time. Suddenly Dracula appears in great anger. He grabs the woman and shouts, "This man belongs to me." Dracula tells the women they cannot touch Jonathan until he is finished with him. Then the women ask Dracula if they can have something else. Instead, Dracula points to a moving bag on the floor. Jonathan hears what sounds like a crying child inside the bag, which horrifies him. The women disappear into the moonlight and Jonathan faints from fear. Jonathan Harker wakes up in his own bed after the terrifying night with the 3 vampire women. He is not sure if it was a dream, but deep inside he knows it was real. He believes Count Dracula carried him back to his room. Jonathan becomes even more afraid. His room, once frightening, now feels safer than the room with the vampire women. Later, Jonathan returns to the mysterious room in daylight, but the door is locked from the inside. Now he is certain the women were real. Soon after, Dracula forces Jonathan to write 3 letters, one saying he will leave soon, one saying he already left the castle, one saying he safely arrived in another town. Jonathan realizes Dracula is planning his death and wants people to believe Jonathan left safely. Jonathan understands he may not live much longer. A group of gypsies called the Skaney arrive at the castle. Jonathan secretly writes letters to Mina and Mr. Hawkins asking for help. He throws the letters from the window, but Dracula catches the letters. He burns Mina's letter in front of Jonathan and locks him inside again. Jonathan slowly realizes he is completely trapped. Later, Jonathan discovers all his papers, money, travel notes, and clothes are missing. Dracula has taken everything that could help him escape. One night Jonathan sees Dracula wearing Jonathan's own clothes while climbing out of the castle wall like a lizard. Jonathan understands Dracula is trying to make people believe Jonathan is committing crimes. This terrifies Jonathan even more. Later that night, Jonathan sees the ghostly vampire women again forming from moonlight and floating dust. He runs away in fear. Then Jonathan hears a woman outside the castle crying, "Monster, give me my child." She begs Dracula to return her baby. Dracula answers by calling wolves. A pack of wolves rushes into the courtyard and kills the woman. Jonathan realizes the child is already dead. By morning, Jonathan decides he must act quickly. He notices Dracula is never seen during daytime. He believes Dracula sleeps during the day. Jonathan finally makes a desperate plan. He will climb down the castle wall himself and enter Dracula's room through the window, just like Dracula does. Even if he dies trying, Jonathan believes it is better than waiting helplessly in the castle. Jonathan Harker finally decides to risk his life. He climbs outside the castle wall and enters Dracula's room through the window, just like Dracula does. The climb is very dangerous, but Jonathan succeeds. Inside the room, he finds no sign of Dracula at first. The room is old, dusty, and almost empty. But in one corner he discovers a huge pile of ancient gold coins and old jewelry from many different countries. Jonathan continues exploring and finds a hidden passage leading down into a dark underground chapel that smells like fresh earth and death. There are many large wooden boxes filled with dirt. Then he makes a horrifying discovery. Count Dracula is lying inside one of the boxes. He looks dead, but not fully dead. His eyes are open, his skin is pale, and his lips are red like blood. Jonathan tries to find the castle key on Dracula's body, but fear overwhelms him and he runs away. Later, Dracula tells Jonathan that tomorrow they will separate. Jonathan knows Dracula is lying and planning something evil. Jonathan asks to leave immediately, but Dracula opens the castle door only enough to show the wolves waiting outside. Their glowing eyes and sharp teeth terrify Jonathan. Jonathan realizes Dracula wants him either trapped inside or dead outside. That night Jonathan hears Dracula speaking to the 3 vampire women. "Tonight is mine. Tomorrow night is yours." Jonathan understands the women plan to kill him soon. The next morning Jonathan tries to escape again. He climbs back into Dracula's underground hiding place. This time Dracula looks different. younger, stronger, and covered with fresh blood after feeding on victims. Jonathan becomes furious when he realizes Dracula plans to travel to London and spread evil there. In desperation, Jonathan grabs a shovel and attacks Dracula's face. But Dracula suddenly opens his eyes, terrifying Jonathan. The attack fails. Soon the gypsies and workers arrive to move Dracula's boxes. Jonathan becomes trapped again inside the castle. Now he is completely alone with the 3 vampire women. Jonathan decides he would rather risk death climbing the castle walls than stay and become their victim. At the end, he says goodbye to Mina and prepares for one final desperate escape. This chapter changes from Jonathan's scary castle story to letters between Mina Murray and Lucy Westenra. Mina writes to Lucy. Mina says she has been very busy working as a school assistant. She misses Lucy and wants to spend time with her by the sea. Mina is practicing shorthand and typing because she wants to help Jonathan in the future after they marry. She says Jonathan is traveling in Transylvania and will return soon. Mina also teases Lucy about rumors of a tall, handsome man. Lucy talks about Arthur and Dr. Seward. Lucy replies to Mina and talks about 2 men she knows, Arthur Holmwood, handsome and rich, Dr. John Seward, a smart doctor who runs a mental hospital. Lucy says Dr. Seward studies people's minds and looks directly into people's eyes as if reading their thoughts. Then Lucy admits something important. She is in love with Arthur Holmwood. She feels shy and emotional while writing about him. 3 marriage proposals in one day. Lucy later writes another letter with shocking news. She received 3 marriage proposals in one day. Proposal 1, Dr. John Seward. Dr. Seward tells Lucy he loves her deeply and wants to marry her. He speaks honestly and respectfully. Lucy sadly refuses him because she already loves someone else. Even though rejected, Dr. Seward kindly says he will always remain her friend. Proposal 2, Quincy Morris. The second man is Quincy P. Morris, a cheerful American from Texas. He jokes and speaks warmly, but he truly loves Lucy. He asks her to marry him in a sweet and emotional way. Lucy again explains she loves another man. Quincy is sad, but noble and brave. He tells Lucy he still wants to be her friend. Before leaving, he asks for one kiss, and Lucy kisses him kindly. Proposal 3, Arthur Holmwood. Finally, Lucy hints that the third proposal came from Arthur Holmwood, the man she truly loves. She happily accepts him. Lucy says she feels extremely happy and grateful. Dr. Seward feels heartbroken after Lucy rejects him. To distract himself, he studies one of his strange patients, Renfield. Renfield is very strong, mentally unstable, obsessed with strange ideas. Dr. Seward thinks Renfield may become dangerous. This is important because Renfield later becomes deeply connected to Dracula. Quincy writes to Arthur and invites him and Dr. Seward to meet together. Even though all 3 men loved Lucy, they still remain friends. Arthur sends a telegram saying he will come. Tonight, the mystery and fear in Whitby grow even stronger. A dark abandoned ship arrives at the harbor, its crew completely missing, and strange events begin to spread through the town. Today's part of Dracula is filled with suspense, darkness, and mystery. Mina Murray arrives in Whitby by train. Lucy meets her at the station. Mina thinks Lucy looks more beautiful and healthy than before. Mina likes Whitby very much because the town is beside the sea. There is a river called the Esk. There are red-roofed houses on the hills. There is an old ruined church called Whitby Abbey above the town. The place feels beautiful, peaceful, and a little mysterious. Mina loves sitting in the graveyard near the church because she can see the sea, the harbor, ships, the cliffs. Some graves are broken because part of the hill has fallen into the sea. People in Whitby tell scary stories about a white lady ghost, bells heard at sea when ships sink. Mina becomes interested in these stories. Mina meets a very old sailor. He says he is nearly 100 years old. The old man does not believe in ghosts or strange legends. He thinks many stories are silly. Newspapers spread foolish stories. Even words written on tombstones are sometimes lies. He is strong-minded and likes arguing with people. One day Mina and Lucy sit again in the graveyard. Lucy wears a beautiful white dress, and the old man enjoys sitting near her. The old sailor talks again about ghosts, death, graveyards, human lies. He says many people are not honest, even after death. Mina talks again with the old sailor, Mr. Swales. He laughs at the words written on tombstones. He says many graves are empty because the dead sailors were lost at sea and never brought home. He gives examples of men who, drowned in the ocean, were killed far away, never returned to Whitby, but their tombstones still stand in the graveyard. Mr. Swales believes many tombstones tell lies. Mr. Swales shows Mina and Lucy a tombstone. It says that a young man named George Cannon died with hope of heaven after falling from the rocks, but the old man says the truth is different. According to him, George hated his mother. His mother hated him too. George killed himself with a gun. The family lied on the tombstone to hide the truth. Lucy feels uncomfortable because the bench she likes is placed over the grave. Later, Mina sits alone at night. She feels sad because Jonathan has not written to her for 1 month. She worries something bad happened to him. She watches the lights in the town, the sea, sheep in the fields, people singing in the streets, but she keeps thinking about Jonathan and wishes he were with her. Dr. Seward writes about a patient named Renfield. Renfield acts strangely. He loves catching flies and keeps many in his room. The doctor notices that Renfield is secretive, has strange ideas, loves animals in a strange way. One day Renfield eats a fly alive. He says, "Life gives life." This shocks Dr. Seward. Later, Renfield starts collecting spiders. He feeds the spiders with flies. Then he catches sparrows and feeds them with the spiders. The animals become bigger each time, flies, spiders, birds. Dr. Seward begins to think Renfield has a dangerous plan in his mind. Renfield asks Dr. Seward for a kitten. Then he says he really wants a cat. The doctor becomes worried because he understands Renfield's pattern. Small creatures feed bigger creatures. Renfield enjoys controlling life and death. When Dr. Seward refuses, Renfield becomes angry and dangerous. The doctor thinks Renfield may become violent. Dr. Seward visits Renfield early in the morning. Renfield seems cheerful and starts catching flies again. When the doctor asks about the birds, Renfield calmly says they flew away. But feathers and blood in the room show the truth. Later, the attendant tells Dr. Seward that Renfield became sick and vomited feathers. The doctor realizes Renfield ate the birds alive. Dr. Seward studies Renfield carefully and develops a theory. He believes Renfield is a life-eating maniac. Renfield wants to absorb life and power by eating living creatures. His pattern becomes clear. Flies feed spiders, spiders feed birds, birds would feed a cat. The doctor becomes fascinated and disturbed by Renfield's mind. He wonders how far Renfield's strange hunger could go. Mina finally receives a short letter from Jonathan through Mr. Hawkins. The letter says Jonathan is leaving Castle Dracula and coming home. But Mina feels uneasy because the letter is very short. It does not sound like Jonathan. Something feels wrong to her. At the same time, Lucy begins sleepwalking again. Lucy walks in her sleep almost every night. Mina and Lucy's mother become worried because sleepwalkers can wander into dangerous places like cliffs or rooftops. Mina locks the bedroom door each night for safety. Even while asleep, Lucy searches for the key and seems strangely restless. The weather in Whitby grows dark and frightening. Mina describes gray clouds, rough waves, sea mist, fishing boats rushing home. Everything feels heavy and dangerous, as if something terrible is approaching. A Coast Guard notices a strange Russian ship moving strangely in the storm. The ship seems out of control. He tells Mina, "We'll hear more about her before tomorrow." Mr. Swales speaks kindly and seriously to Mina. He admits that he joked about death because old people fear it deep inside. He says he feels death coming soon, especially in the stormy wind blowing from the sea. His words deeply affect Mina. The scene feels sad, mysterious, and full of warning. A newspaper called the Daily Graph reports a terrible storm in Whitby. At first, the weather was calm and beautiful. Many people were outside enjoying the summer evening, but later, strange clouds appeared, the air became heavy and silent. Old fishermen warned that a storm was coming. Soon the sea became violent and dangerous. Huge waves crashed against the harbor while thunder and lightning filled the sky. During the storm, people saw a strange foreign ship moving toward the harbor. The ship looked out of control because all sails were still open, no crew could be seen. It moved strangely through the waves. Everyone expected the ship to crash on the rocks, but suddenly, through the storm and fog, the ship entered the harbor safely as if guided by some supernatural force. The ship's name was the Demeter. When people boarded the ship, they found something horrifying. The captain was dead and tied to the wheel of the ship. A crucifix and prayer beads were wrapped around his hands. Doctors believed he had already been dead for 2 days, yet the ship still arrived safely at the harbor. This frightened everyone watching. The moment the ship hit the shore, a huge black dog jumped out from inside the ship. The animal quickly ran toward the churchyard cliffs and disappeared into the darkness. People later searched for the dog, but nobody could find it. Soon after, another large dog in town was found dead with terrible wounds on its body. This made the mystery even more frightening. The next day, officials inspected the Demeter. They discovered the ship came from Varna. It carried large wooden boxes. The boxes were filled with earth or mold. The cargo was sent to a lawyer named Mr. Billington. People in Whitby became obsessed with the strange story. Investigators found the captain's logbook and a paper inside a bottle. The records mentioned crew members disappearing, fear growing on the ship, strange events during the voyage. The newspaper reporter says the story sounds like madness and horror. The mystery of the Demeter is only beginning. The ship Demeter leaves Varna on July 6. Its cargo includes silver sand, large wooden boxes filled with earth. At first, everything seems normal. But after a few days, the crew begins acting frightened. The sailors say there is something on the ship. One sailor says he saw a strange man on board, tall, thin, pale. The man appeared suddenly and disappeared mysteriously. The captain searches the entire ship with lanterns, but nobody finds anything. Even so, the fear grows stronger among the crew. Soon, sailors start disappearing one by one. Every night, a sailor goes missing. Nobody sees what happened. Panic spreads across the ship. The crew becomes exhausted and terrified. The captain and first mate begin carrying weapons because they believe something evil is hunting them. The first mate finally sees the creature clearly. He tells the captain, "It looks like a tall pale man. He stabbed it with a knife." but the knife passed through it like air. The mate becomes completely mad with fear. He believes the creature hides inside the wooden boxes filled with earth. The first mate goes below deck to search the boxes. Suddenly, he returns screaming in terror. He says, "He is there." The mate believes death in the sea is better than staying on the ship. Then he jumps overboard into the ocean. Now the captain is alone. The captain finally sees the monster himself. He calls him, a fiend or monster. Even though he is terrified, he refuses to abandon his ship. He ties himself to the wheel with a crucifix so the creature cannot touch him. He writes his final message, praying for God's help and hoping someone will find the bottle and understand the truth. Soon after, the Demeter reaches Whitby with the dead captain still tied to the wheel. People in Whitby believe the captain of the Demeter was brave and honorable. Nobody knows exactly what happened on the ship, so the official decision is an open verdict, meaning the mystery is unsolved. The townspeople decide to give the captain a public funeral. Important details: more than 100 boats join the funeral procession. The captain is buried in the churchyard on the cliff. People treat him like a hero. The large black dog that escaped from the ship is still missing. Mina Murray says the storm was terrifying. The wind sounded very loud around the house. During the night, Lucy Westenra sleepwalks again. She gets up and dresses herself twice. Mina stops her and puts her back to bed. Lucy never fully wakes up. Mina becomes more worried about Lucy's strange behavior, Jonathan's disappearance. The next morning, Mina and Lucy go to the harbor. The sea still looks violent and dangerous. Mina feels thankful Jonathan is not at sea during the storm, but she still does not know where he is. She feels anxious, helpless, afraid for Jonathan's safety. The old man, Mr. Swales, is found dead on the bench near the cliff. His neck is broken. People think he died from fear because his face looked terrified. His expression shocked everyone. Mina feels very sad for him. Lucy becomes deeply upset by the event. During the funeral, a man's dog behaves strangely. The dog barks wildly, refuses to come near the grave, looks terrified. When the owner forces the dog onto the tombstone, the dog suddenly becomes quiet. It trembles with fear. It crouches down in terror. Lucy feels extremely disturbed by this. Mina thinks Lucy is very emotionally sensitive and easily affected by strange events. Mina believes all these strange events are affecting Lucy's mind. The ghost ship, the dead captain, the missing dog, Mr. Swale's death, the frightened animal. To help Lucy sleep peacefully, Mina decides to take her on a long walk along the cliffs to Robin Hood's Bay. She hopes Lucy will become too tired to sleepwalk again. This chapter increases the feeling of fear and mystery in Dracula. Important themes: death and fear, strange supernatural signs, Lucy becoming weaker and more disturbed, animals sensing danger before humans do. Mina writes in her diary late at night. She is very tired after spending the day walking with Lucy. They laugh together, drink tea, and enjoy the beautiful seaside. Lucy seems happier and healthier than before. Mina hopes Lucy's sleepwalking problem is ending. Mina also thinks about Jonathan and worries because she still has no news from him. Later that night, Mina suddenly wakes up feeling afraid. She checks Lucy's bed and discovers Lucy is gone. The front door is open, so Mina runs outside to search for her. The town is dark and silent. From a distance, Mina sees Lucy lying on their favorite bench near the churchyard. She also sees a strange dark figure bending over Lucy. When Mina calls Lucy's name, the dark figure disappears. Mina reaches Lucy and finds her asleep, breathing heavily. Mina wraps Lucy in a shawl and carefully wakes her up. Lucy follows Mina home quietly like a child. Mina worries about Lucy's health and reputation. She does not want anyone to know Lucy was sleepwalking outside at night. Back home, Lucy asks Mina not to tell anyone, especially her mother. Mina agrees. The next morning, Lucy actually looks healthier. Mina notices 2 tiny red marks are very important later in the story. More strange nights. The following nights become strange again. Lucy tries to leave the room while asleep. Mina locks the door to keep her safe. One night, Mina sees a large bat flying outside the window in the moonlight. The bat flies near Lucy's window and toward the abbey. Mina Murray receives a letter saying that Jonathan Harker is alive in a hospital in Budapest. Jonathan was very sick after terrible experiences. Mina becomes emotional and prepares to travel to him and care for him. Sister Agatha says Jonathan suffered from a dangerous brain fever. During his illness, he talked about wolves, blood, demons, ghosts. She warns Mina to protect Jonathan from fear and excitement because his mind is still weak. Renfield suddenly changes his behavior. He says, "The master is at hand." Dr. Seward thinks Renfield may be becoming dangerously insane. During the night, Renfield escapes from the asylum through a window. Dr. Seward and the workers chase him through the darkness. Renfield is found near the old house called Carfax. He speaks to someone unseen and says, "Master, I am your servant." This strongly suggests he is serving Count Dracula. When the men try to catch him, Renfield fights like a wild animal. He is finally chained and locked safely inside the asylum. Mina Harker arrives in Budapest and finally sees Jonathan Harker. Jonathan is very thin, pale, and weak. He remembers little about the terrible events that happened to him. Mina decides not to force him to remember because she fears it may hurt his mind again. Jonathan gives Mina his diary and tells her the truth about his terrible experiences is inside. He does not want to remember it. She may read it if necessary. He asks Mina to keep it secret unless duty forces them to face the past again. This shows deep trust between husband and wife. Mina and Jonathan are married in the hospital. Mina becomes very emotional and happy. She wraps Jonathan's diary with ribbon and seals it using her wedding ring as a promise of trust and loyalty. Lucy Westenra writes to Mina and says she feels much healthier. She spends time with Arthur Holmwood, walking, riding, rowing, fishing, playing tennis. Lucy says she has stopped sleepwalking. Renfield suddenly becomes calmer at night. Dr. Seward notices Renfield grows quiet when the moon rises. He becomes violent again before sunrise. He keeps saying, "I can wait." This makes Dr. Seward suspicious that some outside force controls him. One night, Renfield escapes again and runs to the old chapel near Carfax. Dr. Seward sees a huge bat flying silently across the moonlit sky. After seeing the bat, Renfield suddenly becomes calm and obedient. This suggests a connection between the bat and Count Dracula. Later, Lucy writes in her diary that she feels weak and frightened again. She cannot explain why, but she feels tired, nervous, afraid. The dark mystery around her is beginning again. Lucy Westenra has another terrible night. She hears scratching sounds at the window and wakes feeling very weak, pale, unable to breathe well. Her throat also hurts, and she feels frightened without knowing why. Arthur Holmwood becomes deeply worried about Lucy's health. He writes to Dr. John Seward asking him to secretly examine Lucy because she looks worse every day. Her mother is also seriously ill. He fears something is harming Lucy mentally or physically. Dr. Seward visits Lucy and notices she acts cheerful in front of her mother. Once alone, she becomes exhausted and sad. He discovers her blood seems normal, physically she should be healthy, but she has breathing problems and frightening dreams. Lucy also tells him about her old sleepwalking problem. Dr. Seward asks his famous teacher, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, to come help Lucy. Van Helsing is a brilliant doctor, a scientist, very intelligent and experienced. He quickly travels from Amsterdam to examine Lucy. After carefully examining Lucy, Van Helsing says, she has lost blood, but she is not naturally anemic. There must be another hidden cause. He becomes very serious and mysterious, suggesting the situation may be life and death. Meanwhile, Renfield suddenly becomes violently insane again at noon. It takes several men to control him. Afterward, he falls into deep sadness and silence, making Dr. Seward even more suspicious that a dark force is affecting him. Renfield suddenly changes his behavior again. Dr. Seward finds him calm, polite, collecting flies again. Renfield apologizes for his violent actions and asks for his notebook, more sugar for the flies. He begins acting like his old self again. For a moment, Renfield looks deeply sad and says, "All over. He has deserted me." This suggests that the mysterious master he followed may have abandoned him. Dr. Seward becomes even more curious about what controls Renfield's mind. Later that evening, as the sun begins to set, Renfield suddenly becomes violently insane again. Dr. Seward notices Renfield grows calmer exactly when the sun disappears. His strange behavior seems connected to certain times of day. This makes Seward suspect some dark supernatural influence. After calming down, Renfield throws away the sugar, releases the flies, throws away the box. Then he says, "I am sick of all that rubbish." His sudden mood changes confuse Dr. Seward even more. At first, Lucy Westenra seems healthier again. Dr. Seward sends telegrams to Professor Abraham Van Helsing saying, "Lucy is improving, she is sleeping better, her color is returning." Suddenly everything becomes worse again. Dr. Seward sends an urgent telegram to Van Helsing, "Terrible change for the worse. Come at once." This shows that Lucy's mysterious illness has become very dangerous. The story's tension increases as the characters realize something evil is getting stronger. Dr. John Seward writes a letter to Arthur Holmwood. He says, "Lucy Westenra is getting worse again. The famous doctor Professor Abraham Van Helsing is coming to help. Lucy's mother is weak and must not receive any shock. Dr. Seward hopes everything will become better soon." Van Helsing tells Dr. Seward, "Do not tell Arthur everything yet. Be patient and careful. Write down every detail." He says doctors must learn from both success and failure. Van Helsing already suspects something strange is happening to Lucy. When Van Helsing sees Lucy, he is shocked. Lucy is very pale, can barely speak, looks weak and lifeless. Van Helsing quickly understands Lucy has lost too much blood, she may die very soon. He says a blood transfusion must happen immediately. Arthur arrives because he is worried about Lucy. Van Helsing decides Arthur should give blood because he is young, strong, and healthy. Arthur says he would gladly give his life for Lucy. Van Helsing gives Lucy medicine to help her sleep. Then Arthur gives blood to Lucy. Slowly, color returns to Lucy's face, her breathing becomes stronger, and she looks alive again. Arthur becomes weak from blood loss, but he is happy Lucy survives. While fixing Lucy's pillow, Van Helsing notices a strange red mark on her throat. The mark is hidden under a black velvet ribbon. Arthur does not notice it, but Van Helsing becomes very serious. At the end, Dr. Seward quietly asks, "What do you make of that mark on her throat?" This makes the mystery even darker and more frightening. Dr. John Seward examines the red marks on Lucy Westenra's throat. He sees 2 tiny puncture wounds, strange white edges around them, but no normal sign of disease. He wonders if the wounds are causing Lucy's blood loss, but he thinks that idea sounds impossible. Professor Abraham Van Helsing becomes very serious and returns to Amsterdam to study more. He warns Seward, "Never leave Lucy alone, watch her all night, and protect her carefully." During the night, Lucy wakes up and says something frightening, "I am afraid to sleep." She explains, every time she sleeps, terrible weakness comes to her. Sleep feels connected to horror and fear. Dr. Seward promises he will stay beside her. He will wake her if nightmares come. Feeling safe, Lucy finally falls into peaceful sleep. The next day Lucy looks healthier. She smiles, talks happily, and feels much stronger. Arthur Holmwood and Dr. Seward are informed that the blood transfusion worked well. Lucy feels safe because Dr. Seward stays nearby during the night. Van Helsing performs another transfusion. Slowly, color returns to Lucy's cheeks, her breathing improves, and she survives again. Dr. Seward feels weak afterward, but he's happy Lucy lives. Van Helsing tells him, "Keep everything secret, especially from Arthur. Nobody understands how Lucy keeps losing blood, why the marks on her neck remain, or what attacks her during sleep." Van Helsing warns Dr. Seward, "Do not fear to think even the most impossible things." The mystery around Lucy grows darker and more supernatural. Lucy Westenra writes in her diary that she finally feels safe. Professor Abraham Van Helsing placed garlic flowers around her room and neck. Lucy says, "She used to fear sleep, strange sounds frightened her, but now she feels peaceful." She even begins to like the smell of garlic. The next morning, Dr. Seward and Van Helsing arrive. Mrs. Westenra happily tells them, Lucy slept very well. The room smelled too strong, so she removed all the garlic flowers and opened the window for fresh air. She does not know the garlic was protecting Lucy. For the first time, Dr. Seward sees Van Helsing lose control. Van Helsing cries loudly, blames fate and evil, fears Lucy may be lost, but he quickly regains strength and says, "We fight him all the same." This shows Van Helsing believes an evil force is attacking Lucy. Lucy again looks pale, weak, almost dead. Van Helsing decides Dr. Seward is too weak now, so Van Helsing himself gives blood to Lucy. After the transfusion, color slowly returns to Lucy's face, and she sleeps peacefully again. For 4 days, Lucy feels much stronger. She says, the nightmares stop, the strange noises disappear, she no longer fears sleep. Van Helsing keeps protecting her with garlic flowers. Even when bats flap outside the window, Lucy is not afraid anymore. The chapter changes to a newspaper story from the Pall Mall Gazette. It tells about a wolf escaping from the zoo, a reporter interviewing the wolf keeper, strange and mysterious events happening around London. This begins another dark mystery connected to Dracula. This chapter shows that Lucy's condition is still very dangerous, even though she sometimes seems to recover. Van Helsing begins to realize that something more than an ordinary illness is attacking Lucy. The garlic becomes an important protection, but a small mistake made by Mrs. Westenra places Lucy in great danger once again. By the end of the chapter, the story increases the fear, mystery, and the feeling that a dark force is secretly drawing closer. Before we continue, if you missed the previous part, Go and watch it first so you can fully understand and enjoy this part of the story. Mr. Builder, the zookeeper, begins telling the story of the escaped wolf. He says that the wolf, Berserker, came from Norway 4 years ago. Berserker was always calm and never caused problems. That is why everyone was surprised when he escaped. One afternoon, Mr. Builder saw a strange man near the wolf cage. The man was tall and thin, had a pointed beard, had red eyes, wore white gloves. The wolf seemed upset because of him. The man calmly touched Berserker's ears. Surprisingly, the wolf allowed it. Mr. Builder thought the stranger looked dangerous and unusual. That night, when the moon rose, all the wolves started howling. Nobody knew why. Later, everything became quiet again. Just before midnight, Mr. Builder checked the cages and found something shocking. Berserker's cage was broken. The wolf had escaped. A gardener said he saw a large gray animal running away. However, Mr. Builder was not sure if the story was true because the gardener remembered it only after hearing about the escape. The reporter asks, "Why do you think the wolf escaped?" Mr. Builder jokingly answers, "He escaped because he wanted to get out." Everyone laughs. Then Mr. Builder says he believes the wolf is probably hiding somewhere nearby because it does not know how to survive in the wild. Suddenly, something hits the window. Mr. Builder looks outside and is amazed. Berserker has returned by himself. The wolf is calm and peaceful. He does not attack anyone. Mr. Builder examines the wolf. He finds cuts on Berserker's head and pieces of broken glass. He thinks the wolf climbed over a wall covered with broken bottles. The wolf seems tired and sorry. Mr. Builder puts Berserker back into his cage. He gives him a large piece of meat. The wolf eats quietly. The strange adventure is over, but the mystery remains. Who was the strange man, and why did Berserker obey him? Dr. Seward is working in his office. Suddenly, his patient, Renfield, breaks into the room holding a knife. Renfield attacks Dr. Seward. He cuts Dr. Seward's wrist. Dr. Seward fights back and knocks him down. When the attendants arrive, they find Renfield licking the doctor's blood from the floor. He keeps repeating, "The blood is the life." This shows that Renfield has become even more obsessed with blood and life. Professor Abraham Van Helsing sends a telegram to Dr. Seward. The message says, "Go to Lucy's house immediately. Check that the garlic flowers are still around Lucy. The flowers are very important." Unfortunately, the telegram arrives late. Dr. Seward worries that something terrible may happen. Lucy Westomer writes a note because she feels very weak. She goes to bed wearing the garlic flowers that Van Helsing gave her. Later she hears, flapping at the window, strange noises outside, a deep howl in the garden. She feels frightened but tries to stay awake. Lucy calls for help. Her mother comes into the room. She lies beside Lucy and tries to comfort her. For a short time everything seems calm, but danger is getting closer. Suddenly there is a loud crash. The window shatters. A huge gray wolf appears. It is Berserker, the escaped wolf from the zoo. Lucy and her mother are terrified. In fear, Lucy's mother grabs the garlic flowers around Lucy's neck and accidentally tears them away. This removes Lucy's protection. Lucy's mother is already weak because of her heart condition. The shock is too much. She suddenly collapses and dies. Lucy is trapped under her mother's body and cannot move. This is one of the saddest moments in the novel. After the wolf disappears, strange dust-like particles enter the room. They swirl through the air. Lucy feels as if she is under a spell. This suggests that Count Dracula has entered the room in one of his supernatural forms. Lucy begins to lose consciousness. The servants come into Lucy's room. They are terrified. Lucy tells them to drink some wine. Later she finds them all unconscious on the floor. Someone has mixed a sleeping drug into the wine. Now, Lucy is alone. Her mother is dead. The servants are asleep. The wolf is still outside. Lucy writes what may be her last message. She says, her mother is dead. She is frightened and weak. She may not survive the night. She ends with a goodbye message to Arthur Holmwood. Goodbye, dear Arthur. If I do not survive this night, God keep you. Dr. John Seward arrives at Lucy's house early in the morning. He knocks on the door. He rings the bell many times. Nobody answers. He becomes worried. He fears something terrible has happened to Lucy. Soon, Professor Abraham Van Helsing arrives. When he hears that nobody is answering, he says, I fear we are too late. The two men decide they must enter the house immediately. They go to a kitchen window. Using tools, they cut through the iron bars. Then they climb inside. The house is silent and empty. In the dining room they find 4 servants lying on the floor. The servants are alive but unconscious. Van Helsing notices the smell of laudanum, a sleeping drug. Someone has drugged them. The doctors enter Lucy's room. They see Lucy lying unconscious, her mother dead beside her, the broken window, the garlic flowers on Mrs. Westenra's chest. Lucy's neck wounds look worse than before. Van Helsing listens carefully to Lucy's chest. Then suddenly he shouts, it is not too late, Lucy is still alive. Van Helsing and Seward work hard to save Lucy. They use brandy to revive her, wake the servants, prepare hot water, place Lucy in a warm bath. Slowly her heart begins beating more strongly. There is hope again. Van Helsing says something strange. If Lucy were only dying, he might let her die peacefully. This suggests that he fears something worse than death. He believes a dark force is trying to claim Lucy. A visitor arrives. It is Quincy Morris. He has received a message from Arthur Holmwood asking about Lucy. Quincy wants to help in any way he can. Lucy has lost too much blood again. Van Helsing and Seward are both exhausted, so Quincy offers his blood. For the 3rd time, Lucy receives a blood transfusion. The treatment helps her survive, but she is still very weak. Van Helsing finds a note that Lucy wrote during the terrible night. He reads it carefully. The note explains, the wolf broke the window, Lucy's mother died, the servants were drugged, strange things entered through the window. Van Helsing now understands more about what happened. Dr. Seward arranges everything after Mrs. Westenra's death. He registers the death, contacts the undertaker, prevents an investigation that could cause more trouble. Meanwhile, Lucy continues sleeping. Quincy talks privately with Dr. Seward. He realizes something important. Van Helsing gave blood to Lucy. Seward gave blood to Lucy. Quincy has now given blood too. 3 men have already sacrificed their blood to save her. Quincy wants to know what is really happening. The mystery surrounding Lucy continues to grow. Quincy Morris begins to understand what is happening. He learns that Arthur Holmwood gave blood to Lucy. Dr. John Seward gave blood. Quincy himself gave blood. Professor Abraham Van Helsing also helped. Quincy cannot understand one thing. Where is all of Lucy's blood going? This question troubles everyone. Lucy wakes up later that day. She sees Van Helsing and Seward beside her. Then she remembers her mother's death. She begins crying softly. The doctors try to comfort her. While half asleep, Lucy takes her note from her chest. She tears it into pieces. Then she acts as if she is throwing the pieces away. Van Helsing watches carefully. He thinks this strange action may mean something important. The next day Lucy is even weaker. She can barely move. Van Helsing notices something strange. When Lucy is awake, she looks normal but weak. When she sleeps, her teeth look longer and sharper. This is another sign that Dracula's influence is growing. Lucy asks to see Arthur. Arthur quickly comes to visit her. When he sees how weak she is, he becomes very emotional. Lucy seems happier when he is near. For a short time she speaks more brightly. A letter arrives from Mina Harker. Sadly, Lucy never reads it. In the letter Mina says, she and Jonathan Harker are safely home. They are living with Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins plans to leave them his property. Jonathan is slowly recovering from his illness. Mina happily asks Lucy about her wedding plans. She has no idea about the tragedy happening at Lucy's house. A report arrives about Renfield. He becomes violent again. When a cart carrying large wooden boxes passes near the asylum, Renfield becomes furious. He shouts, "I will fight for my lord and master." Then he escapes and attacks the workers. The workers are carrying large wooden boxes to the empty house next to the asylum. Renfield seems desperate to stop them. He attacks with incredible strength. Even several men together struggle to control him. This suggests that the boxes are connected to Dracula's secret plans. As the attendants capture him, Renfield keeps shouting, "They shall not rob me. I will fight for my lord and master." These words reveal something important. Renfield is connected to Count Dracula. He believes Dracula is his master. Dr. Seward watches Lucy during the night. Lucy keeps falling asleep and waking up. When she sleeps, she looks strange and weak. Her teeth seem longer and sharper than before. A large bat keeps hitting the window outside. Lucy sometimes removes the garlic flowers, but when awake she holds them tightly. In the morning Van Helsing examines Lucy. The 2 small wounds on her neck have completely disappeared. He becomes very worried. He tells Dr. Seward that Lucy is dying. Arthur is called to say goodbye to her. Arthur comes to Lucy's bedside. Lucy is happy to see him. She speaks softly and lovingly. Everyone hopes she may recover, but suddenly, Lucy changes. Her face becomes strange. Her eyes look cold. Her teeth appear sharp. In a strange voice she says, "Arthur, my love. Kiss me." Arthur moves forward. Van Helsing quickly pulls Arthur away. He shouts, "Not for your life." Van Helsing believes something evil is happening. Lucy looks angry for a moment. Then her face becomes normal again. Lucy thanks Van Helsing. She asks him to protect Arthur. Van Helsing promises. Arthur kisses Lucy gently on the forehead. A few moments later Lucy stops breathing. Lucy dies. Everyone is heartbroken. Dr. Seward believes everything is over and Lucy is finally at peace, but Van Helsing says, "It's only the beginning." This one of the most important and frightening lines in the novel. It means Lucy's death is not the end. A darker horror is about to begin. Van Helsing now understands that Dracula's curse is working. Lucy and her mother's funeral. Lucy and her mother will be buried together. Dr. Seward helps organize everything for the funeral. Everyone is sad. Van Helsing searches Lucy's papers. Van Helsing carefully reads Lucy's letters, notes, and diary. He believes they may contain important secrets. When Seward and Van Helsing see Lucy's body, they are shocked. She looks beautiful, peaceful, and almost alive. Van Helsing puts garlic flowers around Lucy and places a gold crucifix on her mouth to protect her. Van Helsing tells Dr. Seward that he wants to cut off Lucy's head and remove her heart. Seward is horrified and cannot understand why. Van Helsing asks Seward to trust him. He says terrible days are coming and they must work together. During the night, a maid quietly enters Lucy's room. Seward thinks she is showing loyalty and respect to her dead mistress. The next morning, Van Helsing reveals that someone stole the crucifix during the night. He gets it back, but his plan must wait. A lawyer arrives and explains that almost all of the family property will now belong to Arthur Holmwood. Arthur is expected to arrive soon. Van Helsing makes sure Lucy's room looks peaceful and beautiful before he comes. Arthur is heartbroken after losing both his father and Lucy. He enters Lucy's room with Dr. Seward and looks at her one last time. Lucy looks even more beautiful than before. Arthur asks, "Jack, is she really dead?" He cannot believe it because she looks so alive. Arthur kneels beside Lucy and looks at her lovingly. Before leaving, he holds her hand, kisses her forehead, says his final goodbye. This is one of the saddest moments in the novel. After Arthur leaves, Dr. Seward tells Van Helsing that Arthur wondered if Lucy was really dead. Van Helsing replies, "For a moment, I doubted myself." This makes the mystery even stranger. During dinner, Van Helsing asks Arthur to trust him even if he cannot explain everything. Arthur agrees and promises to trust him completely. Van Helsing asks permission to keep all of Lucy's papers, letters, and diary. He says they may help protect others and discover the truth. Arthur gives him permission. That night, Van Helsing does not sleep. He walks around the house watching over Lucy's coffin, which is surrounded by garlic flowers. Mina and Jonathan travel to Exeter. The story changes to Mina's diary. Mina writes that she and Jonathan are now married. Jonathan is a successful solicitor. Their friend Mr. Hawkins has died. They attend his funeral. After returning to London, Mina and Jonathan walk together through Piccadilly. Everything seems peaceful at first. Suddenly Jonathan becomes terrified. He sees a tall, thin man with a long nose, black mustache, pointed beard, sharp white teeth. Jonathan immediately recognizes him. It is Count Dracula. Jonathan turns pale and almost collapses. Mina asks, "Who is that man?" Jonathan replies, "It is the man himself." The chapter ends with fear and suspense because Dracula is now in London. Jonathan keeps staring at the dark man in London. He whispers, "I believe it is the Count, but he has grown young." Jonathan is terrified because he believes the man is Count Dracula. Mina becomes worried about his health and mental condition. Mina gently takes Jonathan away from the street. They sit in a quiet part of the park. Jonathan falls asleep with his head resting on Mina's shoulder. Mina decides she must finally read the secret papers Jonathan brought from Transylvania. When they arrive home, Mina receives a telegram. The message says, "Mrs. Westenra is dead, Lucy is dead, both have been buried." Mina is heartbroken. Arthur and Quincy leave. Back in Dr. Seward's diary, Arthur returns home with Quincy Morris. Dr. Seward admires Quincy's courage and loyalty. Even though Quincy hides his pain, Seward believes he loved Lucy deeply. After the funeral, Van Helsing suddenly begins laughing and crying at the same time. Dr. Seward is shocked. Van Helsing explains that people sometimes laugh during terrible sadness because it helps them survive pain. Van Helsing remembers Arthur saying that his blood transfusion made Lucy his wife. Van Helsing sadly jokes that if that were true, then all the men who gave blood to Lucy would also be connected to her. The joke sounds strange, but it shows how much grief and stress he is carrying. Dr. Seward believes the story is over. Lucy is buried. Everyone has gone their separate ways. He writes the word, "Finis," the end. But the real horror is only beginning. A newspaper reports a strange mystery near Hampstead Heath. Several children disappear during the evening and return the next morning. The children all tell the same story. They say they were with a bluffer lady. Their childish way of saying beautiful lady. The missing children are found with small wounds on their throats. The police think perhaps a dog or animal attacked them, but readers know something much darker may be happening. Another child disappears and is later found weak and pale. Again the child says, "The bluffer lady took me." The story strongly hints that the bluffer lady is actually Lucy Westenra, who may have returned from the dead as a vampire. Mina reads Jonathan's journal open book. Mina spends the day reading Jonathan's diary from Transylvania. She becomes frightened and emotional. She wonders, was Jonathan imagining everything? Was Dracula real? Did the brain fever affect his mind? But deep inside she begins to believe his story may be true. Mina thinks that if Dracula really came to London, she must be ready. She starts typing Jonathan's diary on her typewriter so other people can read it if necessary. She wants to protect Jonathan from suffering. Professor Abraham Van Helsing writes a private letter to Mina. He explains that he has been reading Lucy's letters and diaries. He believes Mina can help him understand important mysteries connected to Lucy. Mina quickly sends a telegram. She invites Van Helsing to visit her immediately. She hopes he can explain what happened to Lucy and perhaps help Jonathan as well. Before Van Helsing arrives, Mina feels nervous and excited. She believes he wants information about Lucy's sleepwalking. At this point, she still does not fully understand the terrible truth. Mina finally meets Van Helsing. She notices his strong appearance, his intelligence, his kindness, his powerful personality. She immediately respects him. Van Helsing asks about Lucy's sleepwalking. Mina tells him she wrote everything down in her diary. At first she gives him the shorthand version as a small joke. Van Helsing cannot read shorthand. Then Mina gives him the typed copy. After reading Mina's journal, Van Helsing becomes extremely excited. He says the diary is like sunlight because it helps explain many mysteries. He thanks Mina warmly. Van Helsing tells Mina she is honest, intelligent, kind, noble. He says Jonathan is lucky to have such a wife. Mina is embarrassed but grateful. Mina finally tells Van Helsing about Jonathan's shock in London when he thought he saw Dracula. She becomes emotional and begs Van Helsing to help her husband. Van Helsing comforts her kindly. This is the moment when the stories of Mina, Jonathan, Lucy, Seward, and Van Helsing truly begin to connect together. Jonathan is feeling better and busy with work. Mina stays at home and reads Jonathan's diary about his terrifying experiences in Transylvania. She becomes frightened and wonders if everything he wrote is true. Mina decides to type all the diary notes so they can be easily shared if needed. She wants to protect Jonathan from more stress. Van Helsing writes a private letter to Mina. He asks for help because Lucy's death is connected to a serious mystery. Mina invites him to visit immediately. She hopes he can explain what happened to Lucy and perhaps help Jonathan too. Van Helsing arrives at Mina's house. He asks about Lucy's sleepwalking in Whitby. Mina gives him her diary. At first she hands him the shorthand version as a joke. Then she gives him the typed copy. Van Helsing is very impressed by Mina's intelligence and honesty. He calls her one of the good and noble women of the world. Mina becomes emotional while talking about Jonathan. She fears her husband may be mentally damaged. Van Helsing comforts her. He promises to help Jonathan. He says he keeps an open mind and does not laugh at strange stories. Mina gives Van Helsing Jonathan's complete journal. After reading it, Van Helsing sends Mina a letter. He says, Jonathan's story is true. Jonathan is not mad. The Count is real. Jonathan is mentally strong and will recover. Mina feels relieved after hearing this. Jonathan meets Van Helsing the next morning. Van Helsing carefully studies him. Jonathan explains that the biggest problem was not knowing whether his experiences were real. Now that Van Helsing confirms the truth, Jonathan feels stronger. The two become friends. Jonathan agrees to help fight Count Dracula. Van Helsing reads a newspaper report. Several children are disappearing around Hampstead. They return with small wounds on their throats. The children say a mysterious bluffer lady took them away. Van Helsing becomes alarmed. Van Helsing shows the newspaper to Dr. Seward. Seward notices that the children's neck wounds look like Lucy's wounds. Van Helsing hints that Lucy's death and the attacks on the children are connected. Seward still does not fully understand. Van Helsing is preparing to reveal the terrible truth. Van Helsing tells Dr. Seward that he is too dependent on science. He says there are many things in the world that science cannot fully explain. People often reject strange things simply because they do not understand them. Van Helsing wants Seward to keep an open mind. Van Helsing gives many examples: hypnotism, mind reading, long-living animals, vampire bats that drink blood, ancient stories about people who cannot die. His purpose is not to prove these stories are true. Van Helsing gives many examples: hypnotism, mind reading, long-living animals, vampire bats that drink blood, ancient stories about people who cannot die. His purpose is not to prove these stories are true. He wants Seward to understand that the world contains mysteries. Van Helsing finally explains his lesson: keep an open mind. Do not let a small truth stop you from discovering a bigger truth. Sometimes people reject reality because it sounds impossible. Seward begins to understand. He agrees to listen carefully. Van Helsing asks, "Do you think the same thing that attacked Lucy attacked the children?" Seward answers, "Yes. He believes the same creature that hurt Lucy is now hurting children." But Van Helsing says, "No." And then he says something far more terrible. Van Helsing reveals, the wounds on the children were made by Miss Lucy. Seward is horrified. He cannot believe it. Lucy is dead and buried. How could she possibly be attacking children? This is one of the biggest turning points in the novel. Van Helsing is finally revealing that Lucy has become something unnatural after death. Dr. Seward becomes very angry when Van Helsing talks about Lucy. He feels as if Van Helsing is insulting her memory. He says, "Dr. Van Helsing, are you mad?" However, when Seward sees the sadness and kindness on Van Helsing's face, he calms down. Van Helsing explains that he is not mad. He says that the truth is much harder to accept than madness. He also says that he tried to tell Seward gently because he knows how much Seward cared about Lucy. Welcome to the next part of our Dracula series. In this chapter, our friends face a terrifying truth that will change everything, as they fight to save the soul of the one they loved. Let's dive into today's story together. They visit the child mentioned in the newspapers. When the bandage is removed from the child's neck, they see 2 small puncture marks. They look exactly like the marks that had been on Lucy's throat. Dr. Vincent thinks a rat may have bitten the child, or perhaps an unusual bat attacked him. The child also says that he wants to play with the bluffer lady. This makes Van Helsing even more suspicious. After dinner at Jack Straw's castle, they go to the cemetery. They climb over the wall and reach Lucy's tomb. The atmosphere is frightening. It is dark and silent. The flowers have died. Spiders and insects have returned. Everything feels cold and lifeless. Van Helsing opens Lucy's coffin. Seward is shocked by what he is doing. Then they discover something unbelievable. Lucy's coffin is empty. Her body is gone. Seward is surprised, but Van Helsing remains calm. Van Helsing asks, "Are you satisfied now?" Seward replies, "I am only satisfied that Lucy's body is not in the coffin." He suggests that perhaps someone stole the body, but Van Helsing wants more proof. They lock the tomb again and separate to keep watch. Seward feels cold, tired, nervous, and annoyed. Hours pass. The clocks strike 12, 1, then 2. Nothing seems to happen, until suddenly Seward notices a white figure moving among the trees. Van Helsing also rushes toward it. As Seward struggles through the dark cemetery, he finally finds Van Helsing holding a sleeping child. Van Helsing asks, "Are you satisfied now?" But Seward still refuses to believe. They carry the child away from the cemetery and examine the child's throat. To Seward's surprise, there are no wounds at all. There are no puncture marks, no bites, no scratches. Seward says triumphantly, "Was I not right?" But the mystery remains. Who brought the child into the cemetery? Who was the white figure they saw? And has Lucy become the creature Van Helsing fears? Van Helsing said, "We arrived just in time." Now they had to decide what to do with the child. They could not take the child directly to the police because they would have to explain why they were in the graveyard at night, how they found the child. So they made another plan. They carried the sleeping child to Hampstead Heath. When they heard a policeman approaching, they placed the child on the path where he would easily be found. They hid nearby and watched. The policeman shined his lantern and suddenly found the child. He cried out in surprise. Van Helsing and Seward too. Dr. Seward could not sleep. Van Helsing planned another expedition. The next day, September 27th, they returned to Lucy's tomb. This time, they waited until a funeral ended and the cemetery became empty. When the sexton locked the gate and left, they knew they were alone. Seward thought, "This is madness. Why open the tomb again when we already know the coffin is empty?" But Van Helsing continued without hesitation. Van Helsing opened the tomb. Then he opened Lucy's coffin again. This time, Seward was horrified. Lucy was inside the coffin. She looked exactly as she had before her funeral. In fact, she looked even more beautiful. Her lips were bright red. Her cheeks had a healthy color. She did not look like someone who had been dead for a week. Seward asked, "Is this some kind of trick?" Van Helsing replied, "Are you convinced now?" Van Helsing pulled back Lucy's lips. He showed Seward her teeth. He said, "Look. They are sharper than before." He pointed to her canine teeth and explained, "With these teeth, the little children can be bitten." Van Helsing believed that Lucy had become one of the undead, a vampire. For the first time, Seward slowly began to believe him. Van Helsing said that Lucy was different from other vampires. According to him, Dracula first attacked Lucy while she was sleepwalking. She died while in a trance-like state. Because of this, she became undead in a different way. Usually vampires look evil while resting, but Lucy still looked sweet and innocent. That made the situation even more painful. Van Helsing said, "There is no evil on her face. That is why it is hard for me to destroy her." Seward felt cold with fear. He realized he was beginning to accept the impossible truth. Seward asked, "How will you do this terrible work?" Van Helsing answered, "I shall cut off her head, fill her mouth with garlic, and drive a stake through her body." Seward shuddered. He had once loved Lucy. The idea of harming her body was horrifying, yet he also feared what she had become. Van Helsing did not act immediately. He stopped and thought carefully. Then he decided to wait. He said Arthur needed to see the truth for himself. If Seward had struggled to believe, then Arthur would struggle even more. Van Helsing worried that Arthur might think Lucy had been buried alive. Van Helsing had gone mad. They had murdered Lucy. He wanted Arthur to witness everything before they acted, he said. He must pass through bitter waters to reach peace, so Van Helsing decided to call Arthur, to invite Quincy Morris, to return the next night. Only then would they do what was necessary. Back at the Berkeley Hotel, Van Helsing wrote a letter to Seward. It was not delivered. The letter said he would spend the night alone in the cemetery. He would seal Lucy's tomb using garlic and a crucifix. He hoped to prevent Lucy from leaving the tomb. However, he warned that Dracula himself might appear. Van Helsing described Dracula as extremely clever, very powerful, strong as 20 men, able to command wolves, and dangerous beyond imagination. If Van Helsing died, he asked Seward to read Jonathan Harker's diaries, hunt Dracula, destroy him by cutting off his head, burning his heart, or driving a stake through it. He ended with a farewell, preparing himself for the possibility that he might never return. After getting a good night's sleep, Dr. Seward begins to doubt Van Helsing again. He thinks, maybe Van Helsing is losing his mind. He cannot understand the strange events. He wonders if Van Helsing himself somehow caused everything. Seward writes, Van Helsing is extremely intelligent. If he became insane, he could still carefully carry out his strange ideas. There must be a logical explanation. Even so, Seward decides, I will watch him carefully and try to discover the truth. That evening, Arthur and Quincy Morris come to Van Helsing's room. Van Helsing tells them, there is an important duty we must perform tonight. Arthur admits that Van Helsing's letter confused him. Quincy says, me too. Neither of them understands what Van Helsing wants. Van Helsing notices that Seward has also returned to doubting him. Van Helsing asks them to trust him before knowing everything. He says, promise me that even if you become angry later, you will not blame yourselves. Quincy immediately supports him. He says, I don't understand him, but I know he's honest. Van Helsing is deeply touched by Quincy's faith in him. Arthur answers carefully. He says, if this goes against my honor as a gentleman or my faith as a Christian, I cannot agree. Van Helsing accepts those conditions. Arthur finally agrees to listen. Then he asks, what exactly are we going to do? Van Helsing replies, we are going to the churchyard at Kingstead. Arthur is shocked. Where Lucy is buried, Van Helsing nods. Van Helsing says, we must enter the tomb. Arthur becomes angry. Then Van Helsing says something even worse, we must open Lucy's coffin. Arthur can barely believe it. He cries, this is too much. He believes disturbing Lucy's grave is disrespectful and dishonorable. He cannot understand why Van Helsing would suggest such a thing. Van Helsing speaks with sadness. He tells Arthur, tonight our feet must walk through thorns, or later the feet you love will walk through flames. He means that temporary pain now may prevent much greater suffering later. Arthur warns him, take care, sir. But Van Helsing asks everyone to hear him out before judging him. Quincy agrees, that's fair enough. Van Helsing says, Lucy is dead. Is that not true? Everyone agrees. Then he says, but if she is not dead? Arthur jumps to his feet. He asks in horror, was she buried alive? Van Helsing answers, I do not say she is alive. I only say she may be undead. Arthur is stunned. Undead? What does that mean? Van Helsing explains that there are mysteries in the world that people do not fully understand. Then Van Helsing asks, may I cut off Lucy's head? Arthur explodes with anger. He shouts, no. Never, he says, Lucy's body must be protected. Her grave must not be dishonored. Van Helsing is torturing him with these ideas. Arthur asks, "Are you mad, or am I mad for listening to this?" Van Helsing stands and replies firmly, "I also have a duty." He says he has responsibilities, to others, to Arthur, to Lucy, and to the dead. Then he promises, "If, after seeing everything, you still disagree, I will answer to you for my actions." He begs Arthur not to leave in anger. Van Helsing explains how much Lucy meant to him. He says, he came from another country to help. He loved Lucy as a dear friend. He gave her his blood. He sacrificed his days and nights trying to save her. Then he says something powerful, "If my own death could help her even now, I would give it freely." Arthur realizes that Van Helsing truly cared about Lucy. He sees that the professor is not cruel. He is simply trying to do what he believes is right. Arthur takes Van Helsing's hand. With a broken voice, he says, "It is hard to understand, but I will go with you and wait." Although he still does not believe Van Helsing completely, he trusts the professor enough to continue. The group is now united. They are ready to face whatever truth waits inside Lucy's tomb. It is almost midnight when Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, Arthur, and Quincy Morris climb over the churchyard wall. The night is dark, clouds move quickly across the sky, and moonlight appears only sometimes. Everyone stays close together. Van Helsing leads the way. Dr. Seward worries about Arthur because Lucy's tomb may remind him of his grief, but Arthur remains calm and brave. Van Helsing unlocks the tomb. Everyone enters. He points toward Lucy's coffin. He asks Seward, "Yesterday, was Lucy's body inside this coffin?" Seward answers, "Yes." Van Helsing opens the coffin. Everyone looks inside, then they jump back in horror. The coffin is empty again. Lucy has disappeared once more. Nobody speaks. The silence is finally broken by Quincy. Quincy says, "Professor, I trust you. But I must ask, did you do this?" Van Helsing swears that he did not touch Lucy's body. He explains everything. 2 nights earlier, he and Seward found the coffin empty. The next day, Lucy's body had returned. They rescued a missing child from the graveyard. He used garlic to stop Lucy from leaving the tomb. Tonight, he removed the garlic. Now Lucy is gone again. Van Helsing says, "Wait with me, and you will see even stranger things." They leave the tomb and stand outside. The fresh night air feels wonderful after the horrible vault. Each man reacts differently. Arthur, silent, confused, trying to understand. Seward, less doubtful than before, beginning to believe. Quincy, calm, brave, accepting whatever comes. Van Helsing, focused on preparing. Van Helsing takes out thin white wafers, a strange putty-like substance. He crushes the wafers and mixes them into the paste. Then he seals the cracks around the tomb door. Quincy asks, "Is this some kind of game?" Van Helsing replies, "It is not." Arthur asks, "What are those wafers?" Van Helsing removes his hat respectfully and says, "The host. I brought it from Amsterdam." The sacred wafers are meant to stop the undead from entering the tomb. The others are shocked by how serious Van Helsing is. After a long silence, Van Helsing whispers, "SSSS." He points down the avenue of yew trees. They see a white figure approaching. The figure is carrying something dark against its chest. Moonlight shines through the clouds. Now they can see clearly. It is Lucy Westenra. But she is no longer the Lucy they knew. She is carrying a small fair-haired child. The men are horrified. This Lucy is different. Before, she was sweet, gentle, pure. Now she is cruel, sensual, heartless. Dr. Seward says, the love he once felt turned into hatred and disgust. Van Helsing shines his lantern on Lucy's face. They see fresh blood on her lips. Blood has run down her chin and stained her white burial clothes. Everyone shudders. Arthur nearly collapses. When Lucy sees them, she snarls like an angry cat. Then, without caring at all, she throws the child onto the ground. The child cries, groans in pain. The woman before them may look like Lucy, but she no longer behaves like Lucy. Lucy walks toward Arthur. She opens her arms and says, "Come to me, Arthur." Then she says, "Leave these others, my arms are hungry for you." And finally, "Come, my husband, come." Her voice sounds beautiful and tempting. Even the others feel its power. Arthur seems hypnotized. He slowly opens his arms toward her. Just as Lucy leaps toward Arthur, Van Helsing jumps in front of them. He raises his golden crucifix. Lucy immediately recoils. Her beautiful face twists with rage. She tries to run back into the tomb, but something invisible stops her. The sacred seal blocks her entrance. Now everyone sees her true face. Her beauty becomes terrifying. Her eyes burn with hatred. Her expression is full of evil. Dr. Seward says, if looks could kill, they would have died right there. Van Helsing asks, "Arthur, shall I continue my work?" Arthur falls to his knees. Covering his face, he says, "Do as you will, friend." There can be no greater horror than this. At last, Arthur believes. He understands that Lucy truly has become undead. Van Helsing removes part of the sacred seal. To everyone's amazement, Lucy passes through the tiny opening and enters the tomb. Then Van Helsing seals the tomb again. He picks up the rescued child. He says, "We can do no more tonight. Tomorrow they will return. There is still difficult work ahead." He comforts Arthur. "You are in bitter waters now. Tomorrow, God willing, you will drink sweet waters." The men leave the child where the police can safely find him. Then they return home, exhausted and heartbroken. They finally sleep. September 29th night. A little before midnight, Dr. Seward, Arthur, and Quincy Morris met Van Helsing. Interestingly, they had all dressed in black clothes. Arthur wore black because he was mourning Lucy. The others wore black almost by instinct, as if they knew they were attending a final funeral. They waited until the gravediggers finished their work. The sexton locked the gate. Everyone had left. Then the churchyard belonged only to them. Van Helsing carried a long leather bag much heavier than his usual one. Everyone understood that something terrible had to be done. They entered the tomb. Van Helsing lit a lantern, 2 candles. Then he opened Lucy's coffin. Inside lay Lucy. She looked beautiful in death. But Seward felt no love anymore. He only felt hatred toward the foul thing that had taken Lucy's shape. Arthur asked, "Is this really Lucy's body, or only a demon in her shape?" Van Helsing answered, "It is her body, and yet not it." Van Helsing calmly removed tools from his bag. He took out a soldering iron, solder, a small oil lamp, surgical knives, a wooden stake, and a heavy hammer. The wooden stake was about 3 feet long, sharpened at one end. Arthur and Quincy were shocked by these preparations, but neither of them ran away. They remained brave. Before beginning, Van Helsing explained. He said that when people become undead, they cannot truly die. They continue forever. They create more victims. Their victims can also become undead. He compared it to ripples spreading across water after a stone is thrown. Then he spoke directly to Arthur. He said, if Arthur had kissed Lucy after she became undead, he too would eventually become one of them. He used the word Nosferatu, which means vampire in Eastern European folklore. Van Helsing explained that Lucy's attacks on children would continue unless she was freed, but if they ended her undead existence, the children's wounds would heal. Lucy's soul would finally rest in peace. Van Helsing gently said, "Who has a greater right than Arthur?" He believed Arthur should be the one to save Lucy, because he loved her most. Lucy herself would probably have chosen him. Everyone looked at Arthur. Arthur stepped forward bravely. Although his hands trembled, his face was pale. He said, "Tell me what I must do, and I shall not falter." Van Helsing told Arthur, "Place the stake over her heart, then hold the hammer firmly." As Van Helsing read prayers for the dead, Arthur had to strike. Van Helsing warned him, "It will be terrible, but only for a short time. Afterward, you will rejoice more than you suffer." Arthur answered, "Go on. Tell me what I am to do." Arthur placed the stake over Lucy's heart. Van Helsing began praying. Quincy and Seward joined him. Then, Arthur struck with all his strength. The creature in the coffin reacted violently. Its body twisted, shook, screamed horribly. Its lips foamed with blood. Its teeth snapped together. But Arthur never stopped. Again, and again, and again, he drove the stake deeper. Dr. Seward compared him to Thor, the mighty god of thunder. Arthur continued because of love and duty. Gradually, the screaming stopped, the shaking became weaker, the movements ended. Finally, everything became still. The terrible task was over. Arthur collapsed from exhaustion. Sweat covered his face, he could barely breathe. When they looked into the coffin again, they were amazed. The horrible vampire was gone. Instead, they saw the real Lucy. Her face once again showed sweetness, purity, peace. The signs of suffering remained, but now she looked human, holy, at rest. It seemed as though her soul had finally been set free. Van Helsing placed his hand on Arthur's shoulder. He asked, "Arthur, am I forgiven now?" Arthur kissed Van Helsing's hand. He replied, "Forgiven? God bless you. You have given my dear one her soul again, and given me peace." Arthur wept silently. Then Van Helsing said, "Now you may kiss her, because she is God's true dead now." Arthur kissed Lucy's lips one final time. This goodbye was filled with love rather than horror. After Arthur and Quincy left the tomb, Van Helsing and Seward completed the work. They cut off Lucy's head, filled her mouth with garlic, closed the coffin, sealed it, locked the tomb. Van Helsing handed the key to Arthur. Lucy could now rest forever. Outside, the birds were singing, the sun was shining, the air felt fresh, everyone felt peace. But Van Helsing reminded them, "Our work is not finished." He said, "We must find the author of all this sorrow." That author was Count Dracula. Van Helsing asked, "Will you help me until the bitter end?" One by one, Arthur, Quincy, Seward took his hand. Together they promised they would hunt Dracula. Van Helsing then revealed that their true quest was only beginning. This chapter is one of the most emotional moments in Dracula. It is about love, sacrifice, mercy, and release. Arthur's painful act is not one of hatred, but of compassion. Lucy is finally freed from her curse, and the friends unite with a new purpose: to hunt Count Dracula and end the evil he has unleashed. See you soon. Have a great day.